when it comes to all of your financial ideas, a financial doctor. If you want to know to spend your money wisely and how to save, you gotta listen to this man. Dr. Terrence Martin. Pleasant good morning to you. How are you?
Allergies are just going crazy right now. You could hear by my voice. It's strained right now, but I think I couldn't miss today's show because I wanted to take the opportunity to really speak towards a topic that is so extremely important, Flames, that and I'm just not seeing it get the attention that it needs in the local media. And that topic specifically has to do with the Trump policies and tariffs that we've seen that will be going into effect on what he is calling Liberation Day, which is Wednesday, this Wednesday, April 2nd. So even though I could barely talk, my eyes are irritated, I thought that this was too important of a topic to let pass by. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and tariff. I mean, I used to do custom brokerage, so I understand, how tariff is used,
Right.
and basically, I mean, I'm not sure, but someone
Mhm.
need to try to sit down and explain to.
And that's exactly what the goal of today's show is. And I apologize to the audience. It's going to be, I'm going to make this as conversational as
Hmm.
possible. It's not going to sound too much like academic speak. So, but Flames, please, if at any point in time anybody calls in
Yes.
or you have a question, by all means, please jump in. But let me first, before we get into today's topic, let me first thank our guests from earlier this month. We have Shannon Holly, Sybil Welch, we had Don Williams, some dynamic, phenomenal women who have and are doing amazing things in our country. And for this month, we highlighted them as a part of Women's History Month. Shannon and her role in Carnival, Sybil Welch and her role from financial literacy, and Miss Dawn Williams, her role in banking, as she's currently the CEO of First Federal Credit Union. So I'm thankful for them for coming through to the show and sharing their story, sharing their path with our listening audience. But today, guys, I want to welcome you to today's episode of Money Matters. And we're turning our focus to a place that is very far from Bastille, and that is Washington, D.C., right? And even though Washington, D.C. is so far away, the corridors of power deeply affects the decisions that are made there in our beautiful Twin Island Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. So in this special, I'm calling it a special because I've been trying to have guests and have very specific topics, but this one is too critical. Today we are exploring how the U.S. President Donald Trump's policies, his past policies, as well as his present policies, can have or will have on our economy there in St. Kitts and Nevis and the wider Caribbean. We look at the tariffs and the trade wars. We look at funding cuts to global health and climate programs. We look at the type to immigration policies and an American first foreign policy retrenchment. And we'll do it sector by sector, from tourism to imports to construction to agriculture. I really want y'all to understand. So I will do my best to keep it extremely conversational and simple. All right, so let's dig into it. Let's first look at his previous term, right? Because first, to understand what's happening today, we have to first go back, because this is a continuation of Trump's previous term, right? Which was 2017 to about 2021. So let's start with a bit of history. When Donald Trump took office in January of 2017, he had this America First agenda, and that quickly made waves worldwide. For countries like ours, a nation of just 53,000 people who heavily tied to the US through trade, tourism, and our diaspora, Those waves were soon felt even there in our shores, from Bastille to Capistia. Now, back in early 2017, when Mr. Trump's initial travel ban went into effect, which restricted Muslims from several countries from entering, that raised alarms even in Bastille. Why would a travel ban targeting places like Yemen and Syria worry a Caribbean island like ours? Because of globalization. And globalization means travel routes are interconnected. Many tourists and international students coming to St. Kitts and Nevis transit through US hubs like Miami. Now, we've had former government officials that have commented on the fact that this could impede the free flow of people, all right? And even indirectly can hurt tourism dependent economy like ours. Now, St. Kitts and Nevis, we host multiple offshore medical schools, as you guys know. We have a vet school. So we really try to attract students from abroad, but not just the US. We have African students. We may have students out of Europe and Asia as well on our shores. And these students make up a sizable chunk of our economy. Exactly how much, I honestly can't say, but I know they contribute significantly to GDP, because think about it. Spending on housing, spending on food, spending on other services. So if the US visa or transit policies make it harder for them to travel in and out of our country, that's a real economic hit to islands like ours, and especially our education, our housing sectors, our automobile rental sectors, etc. Now, during Trump's first term, the Caribbean watched as these trade wars and tariffs first became a centerpiece of US policy. Right? There was an all-out tariff battle with China, steep U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum. We already saw the significant impact of price increases. I had a cousin that built a house maybe 6 years ago, and the size of the house, it took about 450,000 to build it. Today, that house, that same house, is estimated to cost twice as much. This is within 5 to 6 years. Okay? So we'll talk more about this in a moment, but the key point is here, a small import-dependent nation like St. Kitts and Nevis inevitably will feel the squeeze of higher prices, scarcer goods when giants like the US and China fight. And then there was the climate policy. We see in local news, we see our minister, Joel Clark, talking a lot about climate change, and we know we are about to ban the single-use plastics and foam containers and so on. So climate is really important to the sustainable agenda right now for the Drew administration, but yet we have a US president that has a climate policy that is problematic to that agenda. In 2017, Trump pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, halting US contributions to global climate funds and rolling back climate initiatives. So from low-lying island states, this was more than just a geopolitical drama. It struck at the existential future of our countries. We all see the effects of erosion. Just go to our beaches, go to Shipwreck on a Sunday, and look down, look over the restaurant and look at the shoreline, and you will see the effects of erosion. Now, by the end of Trump's first term, then we were also hit with COVID-19 pandemic. Now, at this time, the Trump administration had a feud with the World Health Organization. Everybody would remember that if you were checked in. Now, this culminated in a freezing of funding from the US government and with eventual decision to withdraw. From who? Now, that sent global shockwaves. Again, for Caribbean nations like ours, where our health systems were just not prepared for the impact that it had. I mean, St. Kitts and Nevis, we weathered that storm great. Was it perfect? No. But relative to some of our peers, we did a lot better. The World Health Organization isn't some abstract bureaucracy. It funds coordinated vaccine programs, disease surveillance, etc. And in fact, the US typically provided almost 20% of the World Health Organization's budget. So freezing that amount of money, that will have significant effect. Now, St. Kitts and Nevis, thankfully, we managed COVID relatively well through quick action and help from regional bodies like PAHO. But one can only wonder if we have such a future outbreak, because guess what, guys? He is doing the exact same thing now. We are no longer the United States, that is no longer a part of the World Health Organization. So the 2017 to 21 era gave a preview of how US policies under Trump can directly or indirectly affect St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, there were some positives. This is not all gloom and doom. All right, the United States economy was strong pre-pandemic. Now, that meant that Americans traveled more, boosting tourism. So that's why we had those massive influx of cruise tourists of 1 million plus pre-COVID, because the US economy was strong. All right. But the shocks and uncertainties of tariff wars, climate neglect, immigration crackdowns, and the chaotic pandemic response of then President Trump exposed the vulnerabilities for nations like ours. Now, we're back here in modern day 2025. Here we have Donald Trump back in the White House. He has a new administration, and he's reviving many of these old policies. And in fact, he's going much further in many cases. And sometimes with even this greater zeal, like there's this passion we see coming out of Washington, and it's aggressive. It's outright aggressive, and it's a bullying tactic. So what does that mean for St. Kitts and Nevis going forward? That's what we're going to examine. I wanted to give a historical plane from which we will operate, right? So we're going to look at the impact across each critical sector in our economy. And we're going to first look at these trades and tariffs. You with me still, Flames? I ain't lose you, right?
I'm still here, man, because I know you keep on everybody hear the word tariff and trade deficit.
Yes.
I think most people don't understand what tariff does, and they don't understand as a trade
And that's
deficit.
exactly what we're about to get into.
Because for me personally, based on being, used to have containers coming in, clearing vehicle through custom and different stuff, are with trade. If you don't have enough resources to export to the country that you have the trade deficit against, no matter how much tariff, if you don't have the resources or the know-how to create the substance locally, or I would say in your own country, you have to buy it from another country. And if you're buying it from another country and that country is not buying from you, I don't have the resources, you don't have the resources that country need, they're going to buy it for somewhere else. So there you go, you're going to have a trade deficit between that country and my country. And no amount of tariff would be able to balance that out.
In St. Kitts and Nevis, we have tariffs ourselves, right? And small economies, we have to protect ourselves with, tariffs, quotas, etc. as it comes to trade. But the United States, one of the reasons why I was able to grow so rapidly is because they don't have tariffs. Like when I order something from China right now, there was nothing added. There were no tariffs. We go to customs and we got to basically buy the thing twice. That doesn't happen in the United States.
Wow.
As a form of economic policy, right? It's actually not bad if they just tax at the port and then get rid of income tax, which is what he's suggesting that is going to happen. But we can't ignore it from how this could definitely outright affect St. Kitts and Nevis. Because you're right. I don't think a lot of people understands what's happening. And we think we're insulated because it's America and China fighting, right?
Yeah.
So trade might seem for many like an abstract thing that CEOs or politicians worry about. But on St. Kitts and Nevis, trade policy hits home literally at our kitchen tables and in our shopping carts. Y'all go to Rams and y'all complain every week.
Yeah.
This is a nation that has imports much of what it consumes. And in fact, I think some of the last numbers I saw, I think as much as 50% of our imports were from the United States. So the United States is the partner, but not necessarily the starting point.
Yeah.
It could be that vendor that we are buying from in the United States also buys from China, to your point.
Exactly, right? Yes.
And so now, even though we might say, well, we're not trading directly with Beijing, you are indirectly trading. right? And
Yes.
I'll get more into that in a
Yeah.
little bit. So everything from rice, man, to flour in the
Mm-hmm.
grocery store, to the car parts at the mechanic, to the construction materials, building our homes. So many things are sourced from or through the United
Mm-hmm.
States. When the cost of those goods rises, our supply falters. Every kitchen and division will feel it. Now, for those of you who would say, well, Puerto Rico is the United
United
States, and
States.
in fact, most of what we go to Puerto Rico to buy has to come through the United States
Yeah.
anyway
Yeah.
before it could go to Puerto Rico. So it's already going to be taxed at that port.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Trump trade wars have been one big source of turmoil. And during his first presidency, he slapped tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods targeting China,
Mm-hmm.
but also hitting close to US partners like Canada and Mexico
Yeah.
and even the European Union. Now, at one point in 2018, there was a 25% tariff on steel, meaning if a US company, if Terrence Martins, buying steel from China and I bring that steel in and the steel cost me $1,000, I had to pay the US government
Yeah.
$250.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to take that $250. And the idea is, am I going to pay it off? Am I going to absorb the cost, or am I going to pass it on to the customers, or will it be shared? That's the idea of a tariff.
Yes.
Okay. So, more recently, now, in his return to office, President Trump has ordered new tariffs again, 25% on all cars
Yeah.
and light trucks imported into the US,
Mm-hmm.
and fresh duties on Canada, Mexico, and China again. He added an additional 10%. No, Canada and Mexico, what did they do? They hit back. So now, if we're ordering from Canada, but they get stuff from US suppliers, no, guess what? We now have to deal with this extra tariff
Yeah.
that Canada has just placed on US companies.
Yeah.
The extra tariff that Mexico has just placed on US companies. So even then, we go and we buy directly from Canada. We'll get lumber from Canada. We'll get wine from Canada. We'll get from Mexico. We'll get, I don't know what Mexico, what avocados. I don't know what they sell in Mexico, what we get from them. But whatever we trade from these partners, that's gonna also be
Yeah,
affected.
and what a lot of people don't realize, we are talking about the tariffs, specific and specific items. What about oil? What about gas that the vehicle used to
Right,
transport those stuff? So
right.
it's like,
And that's the thing.
you know,
And oil is in everything, right?
exactly. So you're gonna be paying tariff on the items that you're purchasing. Plus, they're
And
going to
who
increase the value what you spend at the supermarket or at the
and
hardware store.
Canada is a big oil producing
Yeah,
country, yeah. Mexico is a resource rich country
yeah,
as well. So, I if you were to look at, let's consider this trade economics 101. Tariffs are a tax on imports, okay?
yeah.
And often it's the consumer who ends up paying. Now, if we were to look at what some of the rhetoric was around the noise from these tariffs earlier this year, so back in early January, you would see that there was a lot of warning that these new tariffs would ultimately mean higher prices for everyday goods in the
Yeah.
United States. We've seen that echoed by Mexico. We've said that echoed by Canada. China just doing China, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
China could produce most of the stuff. In fact, I lived in China for about 4 months, and what I could tell you is anything imported, it's imported because it's like 5 times more expensive,
Yes.
right? So they could self-sustain in many cases, right? But there's so much integration between US and Chinese economies and companies that this still is going to go be far reaching,
Yeah.
right? So, and because we import so much from the US suppliers, those higher costs gets passed right on to us there in Bastia and in Charlestown. So picture a Kittian family shopping for back to school supplies in August, because these tariffs goes into effect on Wednesday, guys. This Wednesday is Liberation Day according to Trump. Also, imagine some Division contractor buying an American-made appliance.
Yeah.
Suddenly, prices have gone up, and not because of anything that happened here, but because of a policy decided by in Washington.
Yeah.
So I want to break this down to a tangible examples, right? So you have the US, Canada, and Mexico, right? Huge trading partners,
Mm-hmm.
tightly interwoven industries in automobile and agriculture. In fact, my car was assembled in Mexico,
Yeah.
right? And it's a Honda. The U.S. imports a lot of food from Mexico and Canada. Think winter vegetables, think grains, process, and even a lot of the processed food. So there's
Yeah.
25%
And the
tariffs on
avocados as
these.
well.
I'm sorry? The
Avocado.
avocados,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. And it goes down, like you mentioned, oil as well. Now, American supermarkets might see price hikes, right? And now follow the chain. If our local wholesalers in St. Kitts and Nevis typically buy canned goods or frozen goods from
Mm-hmm.
Miami distributors who source from a Mexico, who source from a Canada,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or who use products that use Mexico, Canada, Chinese products. Think water. I always chuckle when I see people selling Costco water for so much, right? They buy it here, they
It's
bring them in, right?
imported.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So all that's gonna be affected. Many goods on American shelves come from these neighboring countries. So tariffs will mean US manufacturers paying more for inputs and passing the cost to consumers. Now, by the time those goods reach Caribbean importers, the price tag is already higher, and that's going to squeeze local
Yes.
consumers
Yes.
more. We're already seeing hints of this, right? So he weighs that tariff war. We see significant increases from steel and lumber costs, and that came as a result. People said COVID was the main factor behind that, but a lot of it also had to do with the trade policies. Now, imagine a small electronics shop. I think there's what Royal Electronics or some store like that there in St.
I
Kitts,
think
and
it's
they
yeah.
found the price to import Chinese-made smartphones, which they like Huawei, which often get via sometimes US distributors. They find that price jump significantly. So now they say, well, we'll go straight to China. Well, what did President Trump do? If you try to cut out the US vendors, right, Flames,
Yeah.
look at what he did. May not
Yes.
if you hear about this.
Yeah.
But if we try to cut out the US vendors and say, we'll be smart and we'll go directly to China, you know what Trump did? He said that he has proposed a whopping $1 million port fee on any ship built in China
Yeah.
that enters a US port.
So the question, it not the question, but it seems like America control the entire trade market.
Listen, they,
I
they
mean,
control the parameter
when
now.
when
They
did we
have that
reach
one
when
built
did
in
we
the
reach that stage?
But you see, the thing is, right? It's not that they control necessarily. They're a big trading partner. They're the largest economy in the world. But what this specific type of policy is getting at, it's targeting China, right? And this, I mean, any ship built in China, bro. So we're talking about the Mexican ship, or maybe a tropical shipping ship,
Yeah.
right? That was just
Yeah.
built in China because it's cheaper to be built in China than to be built in the US.
Is there here? But I mean, you know how Trump operates. He always,
A lot
just
of
throw things out there
Mhm,
and see if it
mhm.
stick. I mean, can you put a tariff on a specific ship that is
He
transporting?
could he could definitely impose a fee. It's just a
So,
proposal now.
so this is a
Whether or not it's going to pass, maybe not, right?
so.
Because a lot of companies are fighting back, right? For example, even tropical shipping, right?
Mhm.
So tropical shipping, serves the Caribbean 60 plus years,
Yeah.
global affiliation, and all of that, right? So we
Mhm.
see a policy like this could also affect our shipping costs because we're talking about we import so much.
Yeah.
It carries nearly half of all the goods imported to the Caribbean region. Tropical shipping is the main shipping agent,
I
right? So this includes all our food, all our building material, all our medicine, you name it. It turns out a lot of tropical ships were built in China,
China. Yeah.
right? So now you could see how that could affect because what that means, according to the CEO of Tropical, is that could force the company to double its freight rates.
Yes. Yes.
Brother, it's
Yes.
already expensive
So
to get anything into St. Kitts.
so that mean, I mean, people might say, I mean, it's a straight war, but I mean, I look at this from a different perspective. This
Mhm.
is destabilizing the entire world.
This
That
is
is what. That
destabilizing
is what.
global
So,
economies.
because there's no way, no matter how much tariff he hikes, no matter how much it will never fix the American problem. It can't fix the problem we have. So it's we now have to be steadfast and find ways to decide that, hey, we need to have different trade routes. So the whole
Mm-hmm.
world have to reshuffle now because
Right.
America, because
And the world is fighting back.
yeah,
Before we saw like Canada was quiet, Trudeau was quiet.
yeah,
No, we see Trudeau fought back, and then his predecessor, the guy that
yeah,
took over from him right now,
creamy, yeah,
he also fought
yeah,
back.
and we have what we have to do also. We have to be very careful. People
Mm-hmm.
might see it and don't think it's going to affect them or don't affect them. We have to be very careful when we go in that office, polling station to mark our X
Right.
because we do not know what it's going to,
It's not just
you know,
about internal governance.
exactly.
We have to think about whether or not the people you are voting for can intelligently sit in a room
Mm-hmm.
and have these type of high level
Yeah,
conversations.
that is true.
All right. So here we have though, bro. Let me break that $1 million down to tropical. Right.
Yeah.
I want to give you an example. I'm getting let's say I'm ordering a 40-foot container out of China.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's $9,500 right now. Okay,
Yeah.
that's 9,500 US dollars to ship
Yes.
from China to Bastia.
Yeah.
This extra $1 million fee, if these ships route through the US, okay, if they have to go through the Panama Canal, whatever, that's an extra $2,500, my man, for 40-foot container. Every container. That's a 25% increase. That's
Yeah.
how it's gonna filter down.
Yeah.
That's what they're thinking the increase would be. So think about Rams that brings in everything.
Yeah.
Think about Marriott that brings in all their food out to the US as well. I used to be the purchasing supervisor at Marriott. I brought in almost 2 containers every week. Right.
Yeah.
So that food cost will be passed on not just to tourists, but also to locals in that market. We're gonna see the effect of that increased shipping rates on our stores at Rams and Value Mart, and even the Chinese supermarkets.
Yeah.
All right. So even if they go on and Caribbean importers, they're going to likely start buying from elsewhere at higher costs.
Yes.
So even though because you see, higher costs, they could just pass on to us, right?
Yeah.
But the shipping costs and so on, then they will have to spread that out strategically. And then you could look online, you could see the price of things, you could do your own math.
Yeah. And a barrel that used to cost 110, now it's 190 to ship it to
Right.
St.
And you're going to have to pay that.
Yeah.
So another angle though, when we look at from trade from this perspective, we need to look at it from our own exports.
Yeah.
Even though we don't export a ton of stuff on a global scale, we do have some niche in like manufacturing, right? I know we had some manufacturing thing that used to assemble different electronic components. We had, we make beverages, we have textiles, and we enjoy duty-free access for many of these products that comes through the US under this policy. It was this Caribbean Basin policy, this initiative, right? So it's one of the reasons some small factories here, they can think it could have hired people to make goods for the US market. So there was a concern in Trump's first term that this zeal that he has for bringing back jobs to America, that could have shut down even factories there in St. Kitts. And in fact, we have seen factories shut down. Think of the industrial side.
Yeah.
In the last 10 years, have you not seen factories shut down?
I think I'm not sure. So let me say, I think we saw.
I think
it's Brush.
I'm not even sure if Jaro Electronics is Electrofab.
Electrofab. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We'd have to do a little research on that.
Okay, so we have to see.
Yeah, but I know a few of them have been closed.
Okay. Okay. So when we look at that, we enjoy these benefits. So let's say that Trump is all America first, like he has been, and he wants to say we have this factory there. I think like there's a factory in Sandy Point or some of those in the industrial side. He might be saying like, hey, like bring back those jobs to the US if they're US companies, right? They might say bring back those jobs, right? Even though they're no real threat to US jobs, the few people that are employed by these companies, right? But what Trump is doing is targeting taxes of these companies that have these off country what you call it, outsourcing, who have outsourced jobs like these.
Yeah.
So there's an interdependence. A tariff in Washington is effectively a tax on consumers in Bastille. A port policy aimed at Beijing, right, or Mexico City or Ontario could decide whether a mom in Charlestown pays $5 or $7 for a pound of chicken, right? Shipped in from Miami. And those prices might be ridiculous. I'm sure it's more expensive than that. But you get my example.
Yeah.
As one Caribbean commentator was saying, that a trade wars among major powers threaten global economic stability, to your point earlier, right? No, so for the people at St. Kitts and Nevis, look, Trump's tariffs policies aren't just headlines about steel and China. They translate into the price of food on the table, the cost of building a home, the fate of local factories. It's a reminder that even distant trade wars can spill
Yeah.
into our markets and into our wallets.
Yeah.
Now, that's just one piece of the puzzle. Let's look at the lifeblood for a minute, Dwayne, on St. Kitts and Nevis's economy. What do you think is the lifeblood of our economy?
Tourism.
Tourism.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at tourism. And again, if anybody listening, if you have any feedback, any comments, please feel free to call in yourself and share. Now, when you look at tourism, St. Kitts and Nevis, tourism is to St. Kitts and Nevis what oil is to Saudi Arabia, or what tech is to Silicon Valley. It's our bread and butter,
Yeah.
our main source of jobs, income, foreign exchange. Travel and tourism contribute significantly to our GDP, directly and indirectly. When you count direct and indirect contributions, it could be somewhere between 40 to 60%.
Yeah.
Okay? Now think about that. Almost $4 to $6 out of every $10 in our economy comes from visitors enjoying our beaches, rainforest, tourist hospitality.
Yeah.
So anything that affects these set of people is going to
Yeah.
affect us at our core.
Yeah, I see that. I experienced that in when 2008 when we
Okay.
had a recession in 2000. Those time I was at the Royal Beach Casino, and
Yeah.
that I'm going to be honest with you. From since then to now, we
It hasn't
haven't
been the same,
we
has it?
haven't get back our key junket players. These are players who used to
Right.
come in from various part of the state to keep to keep the casino running and filling the hotel beds.
Right.
And Marriott can tell you from since 2008 we haven't been seeing those high numbers like for 4 months during the peak season. You might have a 90% now and again, then you
Yeah,
drop to
but it's not
50. It's
consistent.
not consistent like what it used to be before. Prior to 2008, I am telling you, the hotel used to be like an
Brother, I
average.
used to work there with
Oh,
you, brother.
yeah,
and
all
I
right.
remember that.
There you
I
go.
remember them big junkets. Like
Yes.
every week used to got massive planes coming in.
Yes.
Oh, you remember back then the hotel used to be 700 rooms.
Seven,
They didn't
exactly.
split it.
There you
They didn't
go.
split it with vacation club
Yeah.
yet.
And we used to do like what you call skeleton shift, like double shift. You go in from 4 a.m. in the afternoon. You're not going home until 4 a.m. the next morning.
You were just busy.
You're
man,
just
and
busy.
workers.
And the casino used to open from 11:30, I think, or 12 midday till 4 a.m. the next morning. So it goes to show that, that was a recession. If this trade war continue, it's not only going to just isolate America, but it's going to actually destroy regional and international markets.
And that's exactly why I wanted to have this show. And you could hear my voice as
Yeah.
well. But
And
it's so important.
You get a A,
that-
you get double A for the efforts.
Yeah, man. It's so important that we have this conversation, right? Because now, you see, in Trump's first term, right, the U.S. economy wasn't bad. Actually made money on the Trump, and I'm hopeful that we'll still make money again.
I'm going to interject. We all know that was set up from the farmer administration, and it was going up, 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 up.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I
sir.
pay attention.
You're absolutely
You know,
correct.
and
in terms
even
of
even
economic policy
yeah,
and lag.
and
Yes.
even the farmer administration prior to Trump second term you started seeing growth in the American
Yes.
economy, jobs
Yes.
and them stuff there. The amount of job cut since this administration take over. I'm looking out for the number for next week. I'm looking out to see what the numbers going to look like in America for next week. I know it's not good.
We're talking about this DEI, right? And you see, and this really speaks to the heart of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right, because you see, pre-COVID, right, we actually started to see these increase, like I mentioned, in arrivals.
Yes.
Mostly in cruise, but also in the stay over tourism.
Yes.
Right, but then with COVID, we saw the fall off from COVID. Yeah. There were also warning signs even before COVID, because, like you said, policies are lag.
Yes.
So one early worry was that travel ban that he had. stricter U.S. immigration controls.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and then we had the COVID-19 and the situations there. Now, if we were to fast forward to today, we have this pent up travel demand, right? Things are rebounding.
Yeah.
We see more people coming home. We see the minister. I could honestly say maybe tourism is the only sector that has rebounded.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah. It's
still
been
feels
and
slow.
it
It
still
still
feels
feels
slow.
slow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It still feels slow
Yeah.
because the stayover side of it, even though we see an uptick, people are staying
Yeah.
more in the Airbnbs. People
Yeah.
are looking for alternatives or
Yeah,
hotels
because
now.
the cost
The cost
is
is
one,
ridiculous.
and
The cost is
number two. I mean, they hear fear. So even though it's an uptick prior to what it used to be, it's still not where we want. We are supposed to be doing greater,
right. Right.
But we're thankful for the little we're
We've
getting.
seen
But
some islands rebounded at a much
yeah,
faster rate, and then there's a bigger talk about whether or not they will open too late or not, and
yeah,
balance between economy and
yeah,
health, and because Antigua, for example, was open their borders
yeah,
well
yeah,
over a year plus in advance than we did,
yeah,
right? Um, so no, Trump is reportedly considering more travel restrictions.
yeah.
Okay, and we saw which the New York Times published something, and they came out and said it was a lie. But I honestly think there's some truth to that.
That's true to you,
But they
but
were getting
yeah,
hit so many
yeah.
times that they pulled it back. And the
Someone leak it,
reality
someone
is
leak it, and it's a good thing it was leak. Yeah,
exactly because I honestly think that meeting that Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad had with
yeah,
Rubio, I think it would have gone very differently
yeah,
had that not been
yeah,
leaked. Okay. So
yeah,
we found ourselves on this yellow list, and we saw this come out. Now they
yeah,
say it wasn't true, but I still think it was, right?
yeah, yeah.
And maybe
You
this
know,
is me, and I'm
but
not trying to be controversial.
no.
I'm just saying that this man operates his business from a big stick policy.
Yeah,
I'm going to bully you into submission,
yeah,
and if you don't submit,
yeah.
I'm going to take away your lifeblood, right?
But
So
it,
imagine a leader that can't travel.
But
Yeah.
the thing about it with that, I mean, you can lead that way, but the thing is that he taking up that position where it's also gonna cut off his nose and spoil his face. So it's not like he's doing it to just bully us or bully this country. It also is gonna be detriment. It is also detrimental to the United States.
It is. It is. But he's thinking that in time things will be fine. And then we never really understood which era he was talking about when he talked about making America great again.
Yeah.
Because we don't know. So like okay, directly, right? So this is how this travel restrictions, if this is true, or if he continues down this narrative, let's say we don't change our policy and except we don't pay Cuban doctors now directly because Mark Rubio, the Secretary of State, he said that's the issue. He said they're not against Cuban doctors
Yes.
helping, they say they're against how they're paid. So let's say Bastia decides Havana, we are gonna pay doctors directly. Havana says, well, if that's what you want to do, then you need to find other doctors.
But
Because this is how
but
we support our economy.
isn't there more to that? Isn't that I'm not sure. I did a little research myself, but you can't go with OSC and the media nowadays because
Yeah, but this is directly coming
no,
from
but
his.
I listen. We carry that interview live as well. But what I'm saying,
okay.
from what I know about the Cuban doctors, I think I'm not saying it's every doctor, but based on what I read, they get their education free from the state. So I guess maybe there's some part of it where
So it's
yes,
almost like they're bonded. But I think it really comes back into paying. If you pay me a salary, let's say, and this happens all the time, like a staffing agency. So the Republic of Cuba here is acting like a staffing agency in a sense, right? Where the governments pay them and then they pay the doctors. And now what America is saying is that they're not paying them a livable wage. But I can't think of any Cuban medical staff in St. Kitts that isn't living comfortably, no?
Well, let's see.
I don't
The
know.
bigger picture is, I mean,
Right.
from since I was a kid growing up and have knowledge to reading newspaper, I saw what the Cubans been going through with this embargo, and if you are being bombarded with embargoes and sanction upon
You have
sanction.
to be
You
creative
have to
in
be
making money.
creative in finding a way how to sustain your country.
Right.
So
Right.
if you are getting your education for free and you sign up on that, and then when you get your work internally, you might have to pay back something to the state or work 5 years for the state. Cause I think Senkis have something like this where you go and study, they pay for it, you come
You're
back,
bonded. Yeah.
you're
You're bonded.
banded.
Yeah.
But the state that Cuba is in, they have to find ways of me to sustain the government to continue to function.
Right.
So if you are looking to seek every lifeline that they develop and cut that off, what are you leaving for the country to survive?
Exactly.
Do you want to totally eradicate?
They put their backs against the wall, and now they're like, oh, because they found a solution.
Yeah.
They're like, how can we then cut them off again? Because I often say, if America fails, the only country in the West that doesn't fail as well is Cuba.
Yeah. And thank God for those Cuban doctors during the pandemic.
Exactly. Because the USA don't even have enough doctors for their own medical.
They don't have their own doctors and the nurses. Like I have direct access to some of the nursing students and other information. They in shortage when it comes to doctors and medic and nurse and stuff like that.
That's why you have some nurses right now making $100 an hour.
Yes.
So petitions, divisions. If you have US based training, maybe it's time to look at the United States market, because I'm telling you right now.
But then they already. But you see, it's about the money now. But then we're gonna leave with our own strain because we cannot
exactly that. So it's like, but it's a catch-22, because I actually heard though, and this is probably for another conversation. I heard when when nurses, for example, that might have studied in the US come back to St. Kitts, sometimes they get a hard time.
Yeah.
Because the protocols are different. Right?
Yes.
So, but all right, real quickly, let me just run through this because I see time is running out.
Yes.
We only have, and I haven't even gotten through immigration yet, so we might continue this next week. But I just really want people to understand the direct impact when these murmurs happen. If petitions and divisions can easily travel back and forth to the United States, it complicates business, right, and marketing for tourism. So how do our hotel managers attend trade shows in Miami if they suddenly face visa delays? We're already seeing that, right? I actually hear now, I heard of a case recently, whereas previously a group got 10 years, the same group for the same event, they only got one entry visas. So he's a bit more stricter.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what's going to happen with that new embassy that was supposed to open in the region. So indirectly, any bans could also affect our regional neighbors, right? So American tourists themselves could be affected by US policies in less obvious ways. For example, with the trade war and some of his domestic policies, when that leads to an economic downturn, and I'm not asking you, and we're already seeing some upward pressure on inflation as well, American families might tighten their travel budgets, right?
Yeah.
A marginal change in disposable income can translate into thousands of fewer cruise bookings or Caribbean getaways. I could tell you, I know people who are canceling vacations because they are worried. People who are afraid that they're going to be retrenched, so they're not doing any spending at all, right? So remember, when the U.S. sneezes, as the saying goes, the rest of us are going to catch a cold, and our tourism sector will literally get pneumonia, brother.
Yeah.
Right? You talked about 2008. We had 9/11, where we saw similar instances of that as well. There's also the matter of the image and comfort. Tourism is much about perception as reality. Trump's America First rhetoric and policies have strained relations with countries. Well, that might not deter the average sun seeker from hopping on a plane to St. Kitts. Consider this. In the Caribbean, we welcome tourists from all over the world, not just the US. If a traveler from, say, Latin America or the Middle East feels unwelcome, even transiting through America, they might avoid US-based airlines. But who comes to our country every day? Who comes every day?
Yeah, the American Airlines, JetBlue, and you're right.
You understand what I'm saying? That's not something that we're thinking about.
I've been medzing on this, and I think I finally just get to say it openly. This is not a trade war. This is a destabilizing the world war. That's what I feel.
At the same time, while this is happening, Elon Musk is at the front of it.
Yeah.
He's literally putting a lot of contracts with his company in place.
Yeah.
right?
That's a strange one though, to see that you have, the three branches of government, and one branch decide to just
But
give someone
they all
clearance.
run by Republicans, and he will say he put all of them in their jobs.
Yeah. But that's gonna be a different conversation one of these days, because
It
that
is.
that
It
is
is.
like, we can go on for days and try to figure it out and understand it, but
Exactly, and we only got 5 minutes left.
yeah,
So I just want to say, in summary, when it comes to tourism, though, right? And next week, Flames, I'll continue this. I'll talk next
yeah,
week about
yeah,
immigration. I'll talk about I think agriculture, climate change,
mm-hmm.
and so on, right? Because this is such an important topic,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
so in depth. Because as I started researching this, right, and putting it together, I was like, man, this is long.
yeah, yeah,
How am I gonna
yeah.
keep their attention when it comes to things like this? But anyway, in summary, in Saint Kitts and Nevis, we're standing at a crossroads influenced by Trump era
Mm-hmm.
policies. Travel restrictions, harsh immigration stances threaten the free flow of tourists and students. Now, economic and perception shifts in the US influence how Americans travel.
Yeah,
Right, we already saw people traveling less because of what happened with in Washington D.C. with the crash, because of the air traffic controllers, because Trump
yes,
sent so many
yes,
people home.
yeah, yeah,
Right, we're already seeing that, so people are not comfortable
yeah,
traveling, and now this is compounded by all the other noise
yeah,
that's happening.
yeah,
Travel
mm,
restrictions, harsh immigration stances threaten the free flow of these people.
yeah,
Economic perception
yeah,
shifts in the US influence how Americans travel.
yeah,
And the world views travel through America.
yeah,
And and the biggest long-term threat, climate change, is magnified by the rolling back
yeah,
of global climate efforts, putting our tourism assets at
yeah,
risk. It's often said that tourism is a fragile industry,
yeah,
right? In economics, we call it tourism is price elastic.
yeah,
It's sensitive to prices,
mm-hmm.
easily disrupted by
Yeah,
factors beyond any control of Dr. Terence Drew or Minister Marsha Henderson.
Hutchinson, yeah,
The experience of St. Kitts and Nevis citizens, anybody hearing my voice, I want y'all to understand that our experience in these Trump
yeah,
years
yeah,
underscores that truth.
yeah, yeah,
We are resilient people. Our recovery after hurricanes and the
yeah,
pandemic proves that.
yeah,
But external factors can test, external forces can test that resiliency.
yeah,
The
yeah.
hope is that with foresight and adaptation, this is why I'm saying this, because I'm not hearing anything out of our government.
Well, you're not.
I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't hear it, but
No,
maybe you did.
let me just interject here. It's how I've seen things been running is just the norm. The norm. We're not living in normal times. So I hope our leaders, our future leaders, understand that we're living in a world now where that at any given moment you can have a pandemic like COVID again. You can
They
have
talked
some.
about
You,
stuff popping up, like
yes, you
yellow fever is popping up all over
exactly.
now.
You can have someone who they elected in England who decide they want to be a Trump 2.0 or 3.0. So one thing I would like to say, no matter what, I always respect authority. If we, even if I did not vote or voted against whoever the leader is, I'm going to respect. Even though I might
Uh-huh.
not agree with the policy could be thing in me, I am going to respect because he were elected. He said these things, he campaigned on these things, and people
Right.
went to the poll and voted for him. So even though that we are in financial crisis right now, we're in a tariff war right now, which is, I think it's a destabilization, global
It's
destabilization
almost
war.
like they're trying to be stable to become the savior at the end, and
Yeah,
it might
it's
bluff
not.
their
It's
faith.
not. Like, mathematics, maths, trade, about money and the economy.
Mhm.
Tariff is not the savior. It will never be the savior.
At
It is,
all.
it is just something there
It creates
for
deadweight
the
loss in the
government to
economy.
make a little extra when we buy foreign products. And most of
Mhm.
those foreign products we buy, we can't make them in St. Kitts and Nevis. We don't have the
Right.
resources. And even if we do get the factories here, we still have to buy the supply from other
Mhm.
countries. And the reason why a lot of those companies migrate to other countries like China, Japan, Taiwan is because of the resources and
Right.
some of the policies, some of the I won't say policies, some of the fees they would have to pay in America. They don't have to pay
They don't
that.
have to pay there. No,
Yeah.
that's
So if you even if you decide to bring back those plants and those factories to America, you know what's going to happen. Those stuff is going to be very expensive either way.
right. And that's the thing. And the jobs won't come back.
No,
The jobs that he
no,
said these will come
no.
back. They'll
It's
just
not.
find ways to
I
mechanize.
mean,
Even in the stores, they have supermarkets and self checkout lines now.
yes,
Amazon has
yes,
a product
yeah,
where you walk in the store, the only thing people do is stock shelves
yeah,
and clean.
yeah.
All right. So look, that brings us to the end of today's Money Matters, and
Mm-hmm.
we've taken a deep dive first into what is going to be a two-part series on the effects of current President Trump's policies and the effect that it could have on us here in Bastille. Um, Today we looked at the history. We talked a little bit about his first term, and we've started to unpack how those decisions, particularly around trade, travel,
Mm-hmm.
and climate, have impacted uh, our vital industry in St. Kitts and Nevis of tourism.
Yeah,
From tariffs and travel restrictions to a changing global image, we've seen just how interconnected the world is
yeah.
and how even distant policies can shape life right here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Mm-hmm.
But this is only the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah,
Next week, we'll continue our journey and look closely at other sectors that keep our economy ticking. We're going to talk about food imports, construction, manufacturing, a little bit more on agriculture,
yeah,
a little bit more on shipping and foreign
mm,
investments. We'll also explore how immigration policies, because Flames, I think we had around 68 people from St. Kitts and Nevis set to be reintegrated in our
in the
society,
society,
meaning
yes, yeah,
deported.
yeah.
I don't know if they've started to come back
I
yet.
to be honest with you, I haven't. I mean, I haven't seen anything in the press or hear anything. I'm not
So
sure what's
eventually
it.
these people
Yeah,
will come, right?
yeah.
And the
If
reality is,
don't
brother,
forget,
they
if they get
cannot.
caught.
Yeah, but no, so that's what the 68 was who they
Yeah.
already had in detainment,
Oh, okay.
right? They have 68 in detainment to be deported.
Oh, well, I'm
And then
hoping.
they will have others. They may
Yeah.
have other individuals who,
Mhm.
unfortunately, for some reason or
Yeah.
another, may get caught up. So again, if you listen
Yeah.
to the sound of my voice, be diligent there.
Yeah.
So we're gonna continue with these conversations. We're gonna continue with climate disengagement
Mhm.
from the perspective of the U.S. and how that going to affect our
Yeah.
small island independent
Mhm.
agenda, our small island sustainability
Yeah.
agenda,
Yeah.
defunding of international organizations, and how that is going to affect our lives
Yeah.
there. So whether you're a policymaker, a small business owner, whether you're a student or just someone trying to make sense of global headlines, this conversation is and will
Yeah.
always be for you.
Yeah.
Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and remember, when global powers shift, the Caribbean must not drift.
Yeah.
We row together. And that's something that's going to have to stand. CARICOM
Yep.
has to be
Yep.
united in this fight.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Terrence
Yeah.
Martin. Thank you for tuning in with me here. And Dwayne, thank you so much for
You're
your
welcome.
interjection
Yeah.
on Money Matters here on Win FM. I'll catch you next week. And remember, it takes financial knowledge to know that you're making financial mistakes. And Dwayne, this is going to be rebroadcast on Thursday.
Yes.
So if you didn't listen all of it, listen it, share it with a friend, tag somebody, send it to your
Yeah.
minister and ask them if what I'm saying is right.
Yeah.
All right, have a conversation. This is way
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
find
Like just before,
we don't have enough important
ju-
conversations.
just before you go, I think a lot of us just go about our business and think when it comes to the economy, when it comes to custom, oh, that's the government. We have to start pay attention now. We have to start research. We got to know how the world operates. And once we know how the world operates now, it will guide us better when we are making our decision. Especially, I mean, people don't understand. I keep on saying this. When it comes to voting for anyone, we have to get all the knowledge that we should have. Not voting just because, oh, I like him and no, you need to, when you're talking about an issue and they're gonna do this, and you go and research yourself. Look at the pros, look at the cons, because if I like right now, it's bias, it's voters remorse in America right now,
Oh, big time.
you know.
And you know why though? You know who is the biggest beneficiaries of DEI?
Isn't the
So
wives of the
DEI, diversity, equity,
yes.
inclusion, right? So Trump went in and they were like, "Oh, it's wrong." So they went
Yeah.
after affirmative action.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they've been attacking that all these Republican
Yes.
judges and so on.
Yeah.
They attacked affirmative action.
Mm-hmm.
That was repealed. They said teaching anybody using federal dollars to teach critical race theory,
Mm-hmm.
they'll be defunded.
Yeah.
And then they attacked DEI. They said DEI is unfair.
Yeah.
But the largest beneficiary of DEI, they thought they were affecting black people. They
No.
thought they were affecting Hispanics. The largest beneficiary is white women.
White woman.
These white,
Yes.
this is who, that's who's complaining.
Yes.
Look
Yes.
at who's out there on social media.
Yeah, yeah. I was just about to.
It's those
Yeah.
same white
Yes.
women had DEI jobs.
Yeah.
Who
A
got
sen-
jobs in the government
a
and the
s-
private sector for that.
Yeah, a senator is the one who break it because I tell even my girl said like you just be in the news and I said because I want to know what's going on. You see, America,
Right.
I never been there, but I've been from growing up. I realized that as I say, if they sneeze, we catch a cold. So I look at what they do. I look at what the policies they pass and certain policy. I said they pass this policy, but it's gonna affect St. Kitts, it's gonna affect the Caribbean. But a lot of people don't pay attention to those things because I think politics is for politicians, teaching
Right.
is just for teachers. We need to come out of that type
No,
of
we
thinking
need to
and
get out of
start
that
to.
habit.
Nobody say you gotta know from A to Z, but you need to know the basic, just generalization. You can type in something on social media and it will give you a
Let me
little
tell
over. Go
I
ahead.
want to tell you, Dwayne, I know, like, so you're a DJ, right?
Yeah.
You know, you work in the music space,
Yeah.
entertainment space, and you could understand that genre, that industry.
Yeah.
So you may see things happening. You may
Yes.
see like St. Kitts has a downturn in attendance
Yeah.
to parties
Yeah.
because you're out there. You're paying
Yes.
attention to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well, my background is economics.
Yes.
My background is no money and all of that,
Yeah.
right? That's my focus. I live this every day. So when I tell you that I have fear
Mm-hmm.
about the potential outcome that we seem so oblivious about, it's real.
I know
So
it's real.
from my perspective, I'm seeing what could happen. I'm
Yeah.
not saying there's no certainty in anything,
No.
but it's too important not to at least acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
gonna try my best to get a Trump, not a Trump, one of the policy advisors, the economic policy
Yeah.
advisors for Dr. Drew.
Yeah.
I've gotten commitments. I'll put him on the spot. I'll put it
Yeah.
out there. Gary Thomas is
Yeah.
committed to coming on,
Yeah.
and hopefully he could help because we also have to dig into that
Yeah.
IMF report, brother. Because I could tell you,
Yeah.
CBI revenues are down significantly.
Yeah.
So we're talking about no, we need tourism more than
More
ever.
than ever. Yeah. And not just tourism, we gotta find ways to come up with ideas, whether it's gonna be a CARICOM interregional travel, tourism. We need because
Brother.
we can't continue like this. We can't continue like this.
400 US to St. Martin.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I
400
used
US to St. Martin, and you may even get a cup
Two-
of Coke.
2004, 5, 6, 7. We used to go to St. Martin like for 125, 130 US. We used to go to St. Martin sometime twice a
Easy
week.
stuff.
Twice a
Brother,
week.
I remember I went to St. Martin in 05 for 195 VC. Okay.
Yeah.
They pay 195
My,
US now. It's been
my
20
first St.
years.
Kitts passport is stamp out St. Martin. All the pages. Because those time I was a dealer at the casino. When I say dealer, I mean table game dealers. Eh?
Yeah.
So, the influx of as I said, the junkets coming in, money flowing in, you're getting your salary, you're getting your tips.
Yeah, man.
So we used to just jump on that to enjoy St. Martin, but it was a good conversation. I know you're not feeling 100%, and I don't know if you realize we did an hour.
We did
So,
it. Okay.
so I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward for next week program. And
Right, yeah,
now
we
everything
can-
is clear. I will be joining you as well next week, and we have a
Thank
little
you so
chit chat.
much, man. I appreciate it.
All right. So enjoy the rest
Have
of
a
your
good day,
day,
guys.
and I hope you get well soon. Don't push yourself too much. Eat your vegetable, your fruits, and your vitamins. All right.
All right, man. Have yourself a good afternoon.
All right. Stay safe.
All right. Bye.